Hello, welcome to episode 4 of the Bracketville podcast for the 2026 NCAA tournament and season. Joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Dave Ullman. Dave, how you doing?
Good morning, Tim. I'm doing well.
I want to say something right off the get-go for everyone who's watching this because I had to shout out this morning. I've seen several shout outs to you. We really, really, really appreciate that because we put in a lot of work to this, and it's a sometimes, as the person this morning said, we ought to be thankful for certain I'm going to list a couple here, the things they do, and the probably the crap they take, is probably not worth what we do and the time we spend in our wives. We're thankful for our wives that, put up with this for us. So, hey, thank you. Those comments mean the world to us. So, hey, if you want to keep them coming. We really do appreciate them. Thank you so much. Uh, all right. So this morning, we've had one where we've done the bubble. We've had one where we've done the top 4. We've had one where we kind of mushed up the middle. We're kind of just going to go briefly down through it here. By the way, our brackets will come out here a little later this morning, toward noon before the games start. We had one yesterday, and a lot of things happened again last night, and we don't try and I think we can speak to this too. I just want to emphasize this because this has been I've seen this out on social media a lot. The committee does take tournaments into consideration. They do. However, you have to as a fan. And it's hard for us too. We fall into this trap too. We text back and forth all night long. We're like, oh, wait a minute. We better back off on that. It's only 1 point in 30 to 35 points on the year. And it's only one game, and it's a game, but you still have to look at that full resume, I keep telling people that. You gotta understand that. Sometimes things move, and we're gonna talk about some of them. Someone I just missed on, frankly. And I'll give you an example because I don't know how much deep we'll get into it, but Miami of Ohio, all of a sudden, they've got 3 quad 2 wins, where a week ago they had 1, you know? So things change as games are played. So you got to just remember it's just one, but sometimes some things push teams over the limit. And just so you know, the committee, yes, I hadn't seen an update. I don't know if you did. I didn't see an update yesterday like they normally do. They
I just actually saw one this morning.
Okay, they did do another
I
one.
think they said, and I'm working off of memory here, but 36 of the 37 at larges selected.
Oh, so they're kind of holding out. They're that last one.
So that tells us that there have some uncertainty around the cut line, just like we do.
Yeah.
And rather, because I think it's also important to know, and you could probably explain it better than me, Tim, but when they vote teams in, there will be more teams voted in than there will actually be spots for.
Yeah.
And then when they go back to do the final ranking, so even though they have 36 of 37 at larges selected, there will be another group after that
Right.
that gets voted under consideration / into the field, and then those teams will be when the seed list is created, the final 4 or the last 4 in are not truly necessarily the last 4 teams actually voted into the field. It sometimes works out that way, but it could also be teams that get scrubbed down and end up in the final 4 at-large spots, and then those teams go to Dayton. So I think what this tells us this year is the committee is paying attention to a very uneven bubble, is the nice way to say it.
Yeah.
And that rather than trying to rush in and say, we're going to go ahead and select the whole field, let's give this a little room to breathe so that hopefully when we're going through that final selection and then the final rankings, we're making the most informed decision that we can.
Yes. I would say this in past years. This is a little bit of a change because generally by Saturday morning they have the whole field done, and they have most of it seeded. And then what they will do is go through and do multiple scrubs. They usually do a scrub this morning, then they'll do another maybe one later today, and then they'll do another one in Sunday morning real quick before they have the but they'll already have the framework of the bracketing in place. They may already have the top 4 set, and so they know, they can get out in front. They've gotta contact these teams and,
Right, and
the
then the
number
other
1
part of it too
overall and
is
so forth. So, um, but yeah. Now to speculate, let's just start there. To speculate, this tells me, and maybe we're going way too far here. This tells me they're waiting on 2 things. They're looking hard at the A10, and they're looking hard at the Mountain West. And the fact that they had 36-37, they said, "We're not staying up till 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning and start debating. We'll do this in the morning." And so I'm positive that's what they were gonna see who won that game last night, and it was a thriller. San Diego State won by 2, if you haven't heard. And how did that affect the WOB, the net, the overall thing? And to me, when I looked at today, it really boosted San Diego State.
yeah, well, and again, this is a year where, I mean, you call it uneven, whatever words you wanna use to describe this bubble, it is not one of the stronger ones we've had in
No.
recent years, and so, to your point earlier, Tim, teams don't slide 3 seed lines from a conference tournament. That's kind of, maybe a long, long time ago, things like that would happen, but that's not been any sort of normal. The biggest things are cut line breaks. For example, we'll get into this here in a little bit, but like team 24 and 25, right? Well, that's the difference between the final 6 and the first 7. Maybe the bottom of the 4 line, right? The number 16 versus number 17. And then it plays a bigger part when you come down to the bubble, obviously, or like most teams would rather be the final 7 than the first 8,
Mhm.
right? And there'd be teams that would tell you, I would rather be the first 10 than the last 9.
Yeah, right,
Um, but those things matter, but we're not talking about somebody jumping. It sounds big. Ooh, they moved a seed line. Well, they may have moved
right, 1
one spot
spot.
on the seed list. But then the bubble obviously is inherently more amiable anyway because there's just those just teams don't have as strong of profiles. So, yeah, I think they want to leave themselves a little bit of room
Yeah,
to try to
absolutely.
see how this all plays out because if San Diego State wins tonight, then it becomes irrelevant and they become the automatic qualifier. And if VCU were to win, well, then they become automatic. Um,
Then that makes
and
our job
so,
way easier.
and then you're probably down to, debating
SMU.
maybe 1 or 2 teams at that point.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, yeah, and to your point, that's how the whole process works, right? And to your point on this adding the extra team, they just I think when they started, they were always ending in the middle of the line. It's just the way the first group of teams started. So what they'll do is they will probably have could be 2, 3, 4, could be any amount. Uh, they need somebody to scrub against. That last team, they need somebody to scrub against that team. Like, are we sure on this? Okay. Back in the old days, once they voted him in, it was done. And we said, well, that's not fair. And so then they were
Yeah.
like, oh, yeah, we're looking at that. And then the next year they changed it. So anyway,
Well, in this world too, Tim, everybody wants to see who the first 4 out was. So they have to vote somebody onto the list
yeah,
to get a first 4 out.
unless there's some huge surprise, I just can't believe anybody would complain this year. Seriously.
Oh,
I mean,
well,
I listened to Calipari last night. I mean, he wants the whole SEC in, but and then Hurley wants Seton Hall in, who's so far out. I mean, come on. Anyway, all right. So let's get going. We don't have. I don't see anything in the top 4. I would say this though. Duke has kind of taken over the metrics here for a couple weeks. Now all of a sudden, Michigan has taken kind of over that again. Do you see a scenario in which Michigan could be the overall number 1?
I do, and I'll take it a step further. I think there is a possibility that if Arizona wins the Big 12 tonight, and particularly if either Duke or Michigan didn't win their tournament, I think there's a strong case to be made that Arizona would be the number 1 overall in that situation. Um, I think they would have to have help to get there. Um, Either way, they're all gonna be 1 seeds on Sunday night, and they're not fighting for the same region. So it's I guess the only difference would be is if Michigan, to your point, ends up number 1 overall, does it change the pods? Because there was some indication at one point that they would prefer to go to Philadelphia. Whether that's actually true or not, I don't know. I also heard after they kinda walked back from that. So yeah, I mean, I think it's possible with the metrics being what they are. It just for me, if it comes right down to it, the 2 of those teams played head to head on a neutral court and Duke won. Now granted, Duke's without one of the players that played in that game. Um, so I'd kinda lean it probably towards that, but I'll be curious to see if Arizona goes out and wins the Big 12 tonight, and if any of the other falter, I'd be curious to see if because they're all so close,
Yeah.
they would consider scrubbing Arizona to 1 overall. And again, in the big picture, it really doesn't matter because Arizona's gonna go to San Diego regardless.
Now, I'm just gonna mention this as we move on down through the bracket. We're gonna go very quickly through it. Um, Generally speaking, as a bracketologist, you just take a sword right through your heart if you start doing a lot of changes on
Yeah.
Saturday. That's generally the word of it. I personally think there's enough of a gap between Michigan and Arizona that that's not gonna happen. However, an average basketball fan would have watched last night and said, "Holy cow." I mean, that Iowa State Arizona game was unbelievable.
Yeah,
And
can
if
we
Arizona
can
can
we
make
play that for the
shots like
national
that,
championship?
they can beat anybody on any day at any place. I mean, it just what a game.
Yeah. And then I think, again, this is what comes down we talk about all this time, how much impact does it have? How do you factor it in? Because every team is not maybe not literally every team, but so many teams have missed players on and off throughout the year for
Yeah,
illness, injury. A couple of Arizona's losses came when one of their stars was down. So, again, the good news is, regardless of how that goes, we're not talking about 2 teams fighting for the same region, and so a decision becomes really critical as to one stays in the East and one has to go out West or something like that.
right. Yeah, no doubt. Okay, yeah, and I would say this too, I it's hard with the injury too with, like, like, how much Dan Gavitt did say the other day, "Yeah, no, they're really looking at the injuries things up and down the thing," but they've said that before, and then they really don't. I just think too, Michigan has an injury too, so maybe they just go, "Eh," you know,
Yeah, I
it
mean,
is
both
what it
both
is.
of them are
It
missing
looked
a player for the tournament.
to me, it looks like Duke has the better shot of winning their conference tournament just because they have a little easier path now. To me, they got rid of the tougher teams, and although Virginia's good at they just haven't you and I have discussed this. Their metrics and everything look great, but when you watch them, you're just like, "Yeah, I could see them getting knocked out early." You know? Where Arizona is gonna be playing Houston. I mean, that's a they're a load, man. So, yeah, that'd be a great game tonight. And then, we slip a little bit further down, UConn St. John's, number 3. So, which would is just gonna be absolutely electric in the Garden tonight.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, there's some great conference championship games and kind of whetting our appetite for what's down the road. You mentioned this morning to me Houston, UConn.
This is the same story we had in a previous discussion. Um, Obviously, Connecticut's strength is their non-conference collection of wins, which were kind of unrivaled. So you've got to give them credit for that, and those certainly stay on the team sheet. But in fairness, we also have to acknowledge that Connecticut has lost a couple of games that teams like Houston have not. And so I think that also becomes part of the, conversation where, Houston's worst loss metrically was at Kansas, where Connecticut has lost a home game to Creighton, and then they just lost last week to Marquette. And then if you look at the metrics this morning, Houston is, well, top 6 in everything if you consider the strength of record, but their net's up to 5, their wins above bubble comes in at 4. They're basically 4 and 5 in all the predictives, and this is where the difference is, Connecticut's net and predictives have dropped down closer to a 9 to 10, and then you factor in those 2 losses to non-tournament teams that Houston doesn't have, and I think that slight metrical edge could give, emphasis on could give Houston a nod for 5th overall.
Yeah.
Obviously, if they win tonight, I think that definitely would happen. And then, that's just my take. Again, I'm not, you got to be careful not to overreact, but I could also see the committee just watching the 2 teams play in the last month and say, yeah, we just think Houston's a little better.
Yeah, it depends on their thoughts as we rolled on through here. But, I always go back to reveal, and not that they can't remember what they did on the reel. I understand that. But the thoughts in their head are still there. That's where I come from
Yeah.
on the reveal thing. That's why I use that a little bit. And, they had UConn one. Things have changed for UConn. They just haven't looked as good, frankly, as they did early. And, so yeah, but I would think if UConn beats St. John's for the 2 out of the 3, that's pretty strong. It's not as strong as Houston beating Arizona, but still pretty strong.
Yeah. And the only reason that would matter, in the big picture, just from a bracketing standpoint, is if Houston vaults Connecticut, Connecticut could actually then end up in the East region, which would probably benefit them because the way it sits right now for most of us, if Houston is the number 5 overall, then they can't be if Duke stays number 1 overall, you can't have the number 1 and then top 2 seed in the same bracket. So that eliminates UConn from going east. If, let's say, Duke wins and they stay number 1 overall, if you have a situation where Houston overtakes them and becomes 5, then all of a sudden Connecticut can now go to the East, and that allows Iowa State then to go to the Midwest, Houston to the South, and your whoever your final team on the 2 line is ends up out west because it probably, unless that's Iowa State, but then they couldn't go out there
Yeah.
anyway, opposite Arizona. So
What I've found is it kind of like, to put teams where they should go is pretty easy, but this year it's very difficult because you have so many Big 10, so many Big 12 teams that you have to be bracket procedures. A lot of times you're just sending them somewhere so they're not paired up with another team,
and
and
then you got to try to balance the regions, which
yeah,
also
so it
isn't tough.
doesn't make yeah. Yeah, this year's a little bit different in that respect. Okay, so, at the end, we both decided, you've been way ahead of this over me, was something that I think the resumes have changed a little bit, and then just when you look at Iowa State and Illinois, I mean, when you think about them, yeah, you think Iowa State's played much better lately than Illinois, but that's not why. The numbers have changed somewhat too, that we both moved Iowa State into the 2 seed, Illinois the 3, in whatever order. They may drop another one because Purdue, frankly, might jump them as well.
Yeah, in other words, so you kind of get this. You've got Michigan obviously at the top, and then you've got this next trio of Michigan State, Illinois, and Purdue. Both Michigan State and Illinois have lost. Purdue's still playing. They've all been pretty close throughout this process. So, you could make a case if Purdue were to go on and win the Big Ten tournament, they could end up sliding into the final 2 seed. Because again, it sounds like it's a big jump, but it's probably only about 3 spots, 2 spots on the seed
Right.
list. It's just one of those, you got to order them at some point, and it could be an easy out for the committee to say, well, they made it easy for us.
And frankly, for the bracketing procedures, it would be easier if Purdue was a 2.
Well, either them or Michigan State.
Yeah,
Yeah, one of the
yeah,
2.
right.
Yeah.
But anyway, that flows down into there. That we got the 3 seeds. I think they've been pretty static here lately. I don't see a lot of movement there. I don't see a big drop for Nebraska last night. Gonzaga's still there. I know people want to put Gonzaga 4, but I'm sorry, they're 30-3, guys. with a number 6 net. I don't see that. That moves us to 4. The big thing there was a couple things. Number 1, the big push was Alabama 2 of 3, which was a legitimate talking point, but I don't think so now.
No, I think I didn't I have, I've seen so many numbers off the top of my head like you have, Tim, but I think the loss last night probably takes their wob enough out of that scenario to really say, "Hey, we're even though we've had more losses, our strength of schedule and everything could push us to that 3 line." I think that loss last night probably keeps them somewhere on the 4 line there.
And again,
And
not to make this a end
no,
all be all, I'm not trying to, but you gotta remember in the reveal just 3 weeks ago, they were not even in the top 16.
right.
So, they've made a move, no question about it. So, if you're saying, "Yeah, but look at this." Well, yeah, they've gone from 17 to 13. I mean, that's a pretty big move in 2, 3
Yeah.
weeks.
So I think then, Tim, the last thing for me and probably for you and others too is then the very tail end of that 4 line, because, and then the, elephant question in the room is the whole Texas Tech JT Toppin factor. And, since he's been out, they won that huge game at Iowa State. Kind of really looked like, okay, they're going to make this, but maybe recently there have been a couple more chinks in the armor with that. And so to me, that's the great unknown question. The metrics this morning suggests that Texas Tech is probably at the top of the 5 line throughout their metrics all the way across the board. And so it would be very easy for the selection committee to just go with that, you know, particularly because there's still SEC teams playing. Vanderbilt is still playing, who was a top 16 in the reveal. Arkansas is still playing. And again, we're not talking teams swinging 3 seed lines here. We're talking about 2 or 3 positions on the seed
Right.
line. Um, so that's another tough spot for me. I could see it going either way, but with Vanderbilt's kind of success and knowing that how they're playing with one of their key starters back again, um, I could see a scenario where like Texas Tech ends up at the very top of that 5 line because I think, and we had a little bit of discussion about this too, their top end wins are unbelievable, right?
Yes.
But they also have had a few little spots here or there, and then you add in Toppin being out. I think they
Yeah.
could very well land at the top of the 5 line come tomorrow night.
And they don't have a lot of depth. They don't have many wins in that 30, 35, 40 category. They just don't. They're all into the mid 50s. So, yeah.
Sure.
And for me, I mentioned this a couple weeks ago. I said, "Gee, every time we pull up the BV rankings, if you haven't seen them, go to Bracketville and you can see the BV rankings, which are been a really great tool for us because
Yeah.
it kind of pairs up what the committee looked at last year."
And I'll try to
Um,
get those updated today too, just so
yes,
people go,
we
we'll
will.
get them updated. It
We're
may
waiting
not
for
be as
some
soon as our bracket, but it'll be shortly after.
yeah, we're waiting for some data to get loaded. But um, every time we pull those up, I'm like, man, Vanderbilt's right there, if not in the top 16. And you look at other metrics and the WOB and everything else, it just screams, hey, we're right here. And yesterday, finally, that was the last straw for me. I mean, I thought, well, because I think some people have downgraded Tennessee a little quickly, but now you start looking and they look more like a 6 than a 5.
Well, and then I think you also have to factor in, like this morning, I did a head to head, and Wisconsin sort of looks like Texas Tech, except that Wisconsin has all their wins lately, and in the last part of the year. But I think then you start scrubbing Wisconsin against Tennessee, and it's a close. Again, it's some of this stuff always comes down to the eye of the beholder, right? I mean, we could get 10 people in the room and have lots of discussions about it, and there could be various opinions on all aspects of it, and then we would vote, and off we would go. Um, but I think, yeah, I kind of settled with looking at settling maybe with probably with Wisconsin right on that 5-6 line with potentially moving up after the win yesterday. And of course, that's another one. They can hold that spot or it could be real close again tomorrow morning, depending on what they do today. If they, you know, they were to take off Michigan again, then I think that kind of makes it a little bit
Yeah.
easier.
That, I have already made the move simply because and again, you worry it's Saturday morning, how much is the committee really gonna put in this? But man, you can't overlook they've won 5 games against the top 15 and 4 of them on the road away from
Yeah,
home. And
yeah,
and nobody else has that except the top 3 teams in the bracket. So,
yeah,
y you know, I think, yes, when you look at that, and plus the metrics part of it have improved vastly for Wisconsin. Um, as you look at everything that's gone on here lately, and when we're talking about metrics, we're really focusing on not only the WA, but the SOR, and then over on the Ken Palm and the predictive side. Um, Wisconsin right now is moved all the way up to 25th in the net. Um, and they've got, as I said, they have this cluster of 5 awesome wins. They're now 20 in the WOB, which would and 20 and 19 in the SOR, which kinda correlates,
yeah.
and you add that to the 20, that kinda correlates to a 5 seed. And you go over to their predictive measures, T-Rank has them 22 and KenPom 24, so they're in the ballpark. Um,
I mean,
and then
they've
you
done enough now to get there.
Yeah, and then not only that, when I compared Tennessee and Wisconsin early this morning when I was 1 cup in, uh, the thing I looked at was Wisconsin, they won 13 games against Q1 and 2, and their they have a positive win percentage there too, of 13 and 8. Now the schedule they played, top 23 schedule in the country, that's pretty darn good.
Yeah,
If you look at Tennessee, yeah, they have nice wins too, but they've had chances and they're only 6 and 10 against Q1. So they've had 16 shots and they've only won 6. So to me, that was kind of the difference.
yeah. And I
Again,
do think, we live in an era now where, for guys that have been doing this for a long time, we've had to kind of adapt, if you will. But the metrics are becoming an increasingly important aspect of the conversation. They're not the end all be all. There's not a single number that defines where a team's going to be, but they are part of the picture. And when the
absolutely.
whole picture paints a picture that a team is within a certain range based on what we saw last year and some recent years, there's always an outlier here or there, and there could be this year, probably will be. But generally speaking, teams tend to fall somewhere within that range of where their metrics tell the committee that they're at.
Mhm.
And again, sometimes that's along cut lines and it makes a difference of a seed line, and sometimes it's not. But that all becomes important when they do that final scrubbing. They're going to be looking at all those numbers to try to help them differentiate because by this time, after you get past like, the top 6 or 7, then you have another whole group of teams whose resumes look very similar in a lot of different ways. And then the next group, their resumes look similar in a lot of different ways. And so one of the reasons they develop things like the wins above bubble and these metrics is to help them do these slight differentiations between these teams.
Yep. And Kentucky's been I'll say a problem, but they've certainly been a puzzlement all year long. Like I've had them at a 6, I've moved them to an 8, I've had them to a 7, up and down they go. When you look at their metrics, everything screams 7. Nice wins, no doubt about it. But again, if you're looking at, they've had a lot of chances in Q1. They've only come through 5 times. Now, they have played some when you're playing quad 1, obviously you're playing good teams, but even the Texas A&Ms of the world, the North Carolina at home, going back. Obviously when they were on the road at Auburn. So they've had chances to really set their resume apart and haven't done it, and the metrics just say all up and down. Even the predictives are more they lean more toward an 8 seed than a 7. So, I think you add all that up, I think again, how much does strength of schedule come in? They played the 5th toughest schedule in the country. But my experience over the last 3 or 4 years is the committees haven't leaned into that like they used to. They used to lean into that heavy. I don't know how
Yeah,
you
and I
feel.
mean, and I agree. I mean, I've openly told people, like, one of the things I've struggled with is that final 6 seed. And it's always been between BYU, Kentucky, and Louisville. And you're trying to figure out, okay, well, which order, because somebody's going to be a 7. And I had dropped BYU to a 7. They've played better of late. Their numbers suggest that they're a 6. Louisville's numbers suggest they're a 6. They do have the head to head over Kentucky, but Kentucky, has better quality wins. And this is just gets, against the very top of Q1A. Kentucky's 4-9 and Louisville's 1-8. So that's, and again, so it's like, okay, which way do we go here? Is it the metrics or is it the wins? And at some point here, we're just going to make a decision and we're going to go with
Yeah.
it. And they're both going to be in that range. 6 to 7 would be our guess, unless we get a surprise. So it is what it is. I mean, we have to make a best educated guess on what we think they're going to do, and then after today, I'm done with it, and it's going to be what it is. And I've spent too many times getting extra wrinkles on Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock, and I don't do it
I
anymore. The last
you
2
know
years,
what?
I'm like,
You know
it's
me,
just not
Dave.
it's just not worth it.
I've talked about this all year. I don't trust Louisville, and every time they play a big game, they lose. Every time. Every time. Even at home, okay? So, I don't trust them. I think if you gave me eye test between those 3, I would be a nanosecond answer for me, Louisville. But when I sit down and look at all things, and you are so right, they've got nothing. They have not beat a top 25 team in the net. I mean, that I cringe when I look at that. But then you look at the numbers. They have hung at that 14, 15 net ranking all year long, no matter what's happened. The computers love them. Their predictives are 5 seed, but the WAB is right at 23, right there. The SWR is 26, right there. So it's like, ugh. When you do the BV rankings, obviously their net pulls into that, and they get a little bit of a jump. Yeah, it's still when I look at this, I just go, man,
Yeah,
they
I mean,
haven't
it's
beat.
like you try to find something that says I feel really good about it,
Yeah,
and I feel pretty settled with BYU now. It's those 2 for 25 and 26, and at some point tomorrow morning, I will make a final decision, and then that will be that.
yeah. I I have Kentucky the first out on that list, but I could see me flipping that around. The other team and I don't want to get into them very much, but is North Carolina. To me, they're metric darlings too, because to me, I would have them down with Louisville, but they keep sticking in there too. They
Well,
at
and then
least
to
have some more
me,
quality wins.
yeah, to me, I did drop them because to the 6th line, um, because I do think the Caleb Foster, or
Oh,
not,
yeah.
yeah, the injury, not the Caleb Foster. I got so many things going on in my head here, but anyway, the North Carolina injury is a factor. Caleb Wilson, that's who it is.
Yeah.
Um, uh,
And North Carolina has a win over Louisville too.
yeah, I mean, I think they're ahead of Louisville on that list.
And
I'm just
Kentucky.
saying, like,
And
I
Kentucky
think,
both.
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, to me, it's like Tennessee and North Carolina are at the top of the 6th line in one of those orders.
Yeah, I think
Um,
the thing that's sticking with them is North Carolina beat Duke. That just
yeah,
injury aside,
yeah.
and they beat Kansas. I mean,
I mean, it would not shock me to see them have, Carolina at the end of the 5 line too. And St.
yeah,
John's is an interesting one for me because their metrics all say 5, and they've won a lot of games, and they're playing well, and they won the Big East regular season, even if it was a little bit a gift from Connecticut there with Marquette. But if St. John's goes out and wins tonight, I don't think there's any way they're not, at least a
yeah.
5
There's
being
just
the
not
Big East
room.
champions.
You know what I mean?
There's just not room.
Yeah.
And so then the question is, so somebody's got to fall out. So it's either gonna be I don't see them dropping a team like Texas Tech all the way down
Yeah,
to a 6 line.
I
That's
don't
way
either.
too much punishment for them. I could see them at the top of the 5,
Yeah. There's just
because
not
that
room.
team's still really good.
Arkansas has
But
been there all
somebody's
year, and they
gotta
just
go.
keep winning. So,
So,
you can't.
Wisconsin, Tennessee, or North Carolina, 2 of those teams, I guess if St. John's gets blown out tonight, they could be
Yeah,
joined that conversation, but
even
even so,
so.
it's kinda hard.
Even so,
So I'm
and
saying is you've
it's Rick
got
Pitino, I don't know.
you got so basically you got 3 teams for 1 spot on the 5 line, so 2 of
Yeah,
them are gonna be 6s.
because when you watch them, the difference between St. John's this year and last year, they can shoot the basketball, and
Yeah.
and that just yeah. All right, before we go, finish this up, I just wanna mention Bracketville. Go to Bracketville.com, subscribe. You get special product from Dave if you do that. Dave can speak to that, and then, you're gonna see our updates like bracket today. Also, tomorrow, we will have the one late in the afternoon. Hopefully not too late in the afternoon. Hopefully Dave's internet hangs in there if they have storms. So, check it out. We'll have it try and have it as early as possible. We just gotta wait for
Yeah,
that.
and it may be one of those things where we'll connect on this after we're done here, but it's like we may do something like before,
Yeah.
and then we'll both have our contingency bracket sitting over here, so if we need to
Yeah, and we could e
because
we could
it may
even
not
post
change. There's been
one,
years there's
let's
been
say
years my one at noon was the final one, and it was ready to go, and then
yeah,
you have
and we could
to
even do a South Florida / Tulsa or whatever, to let you
yeah,
kinda know way out in advance, here's how we ranked it, or maybe give you just a snapshot of the section of the seed list that have been the biggest issue and
yeah.
post those and so forth.
But by the time we get ready to post tomorrow at noon or whatever, it's pretty much set at that point,
Yeah,
minus what happens,
yeah,
because I think
absolutely.
even the selection committee today most likely is gonna have to make a determination on
Yeah.
VCU
I don't
ahead
see
of the
I don't
A-10
see
final.
any movement in any conference on
You
Sunday
know
that's gonna change my mind one way or the other.
so basically that they're gonna have to decide if they're part of that final group today, and I guess if VCU wins today and gets into the final tomorrow, they'll probably just make a decision that that's it.
Okay, I think, Dave, we're on the same page here. We're gonna jump a little bit, but the 10 seeds have, like, pretty much been stagnant. You could throw Missouri in or out, I get that, or A&M in and out, I get that, but pretty much they've been stagnant. The 8s and 9s to me have been just, oh my god, and the bottom of the 7. It's just been, I went for the struggle for the longest time finding a 4th number 7, because I didn't think the teams I had in there. I think I finally found one in UCLA. It seems to be the popular trend, and frankly, now when you look, they've won 4 games against the top 15.
Yeah, and I
That's in
think
that
this is
section of the
where
bracket, that's pretty strong.
yeah, I mean, I think this is where you have to start looking at again, we're talking about movement. Normally, you don't get a lot on the weekend, but their movement has happened now before the weekend. And again, it's not that their resume is all of a suddenly great, but comparatively to the teams that they're around, so now you start getting them against like Clemson, St. Mary's, Georgia, UCLA. Like if you're looking at that group, maybe I would throw TCU in that group. Um, you got to come up with an order of those 5. And this comes down to do you like some of St. Mary's metrics or do you like UCLA has closed the gap on those metrics, but UCLA also has much bigger wins collectively than St. Mary's does. They have the nice win over Gonzaga, but then they also lost 2 of 3 to Santa Clara.
Yeah.
So, to me, I kind of think that, yeah, UCLA um, is right on that cusp of that 7-8 line, and I could see them grabbing that final 7 seed because if the committee's like us and you're trying to figure out who goes there, all of a sudden it just kind of sticks out to you like, well, hey, here's an easy choice.
Yeah. Well, and no, that win last night just boosted their metrics like crazy because they were always screaming 8 seed all up and down the list. Now they're screaming 7 seed all up and down the list. So,
Yeah.
and you couple that with, like I said, 4 top 15 wins. Granted, most of them were at home, but now, however, we have the Billadou thing, who sat out the whole second hour last night. I don't know if that
Yeah,
means.
I mean, supposedly, we're not gonna hear anything probably, and my guess is, this is the gamesmanship. Unless they absolutely find out something that would prohibit him from playing in the tournament, he will be considered available even if he ends up not
Yeah,
being
right.
able to play.
It didn't seem like it was too serious. I don't know. It might have been more
Yeah.
precautionary because they had a big lead and, by the way, I wanna mention one something real quickly is the number of basketball games I've watched in the last 2 days. 2 humorous things from 2 guys you wouldn't think are humorous on one a post-game interview, one a during in-game interview about fashion statements. Mick Cronin looking at Eddie Katz going, "Holy cow, look at those shoes you have on. Those are hot, Andy. What that?" He goes, "Those are expensive, aren't they?" It was just hilarious. And then Rick Barnes going to the sideline reporter, and I can't remember her name, but going, "Wow, that's a big rock." He goes, "Is that real?" He goes, "I'm only saying this because your husband's sitting right over there." And, she's like, "Yeah, it's real." He goes, "Wow, that's pretty impressive." Rick Barnes. I mean, it's
Hey,
great. It's great to see
they're all at this
personality from these
point, at
guys.
this Tim, they're all tired of the regular season too. They're just ready to
It was a
if you know
very
if you know you're going, you're just ready to get there.
it was a very Greg Popovich in-game interview there, you know? Okay, so yeah, and I've struggled. God, I struggle with Miami and Clemson. I to me, eye test. I think Clemson's a better team, but Miami has the better metrics and the more wins, and so I bumped them to a 7 over Clemson, who's an 8, because I had 2 spots there to fill. St. Mary's to me, yeah, the last couple of years they've kind of pounded on the WCC. So I'm worried that they're going to be like an 8, but I don't know who else to pull up to this 7. I
Yeah,
just
I
don't
mean,
see
I
anybody else.
ended up with, like, Clemson right at the end of that line.
I had them there
Well,
too.
I couldn't penalize him too much for losing last night, and then, I originally have had Georgia there,
Yes,
and
yes.
then the whole so it's like I gotta re-scrub that probably later today before tomorrow morning, but it's kind of like because those 4, like, you throw Clemson, UCLA, St. Mary's, Georgia, and then TCU in there, and it's like UCLA kinda seems maybe at the top of that list now,
Hmm.
but then it kinda comes down to Clemson, St. Mary's, Georgia, TCU, and what flavor of the month. I mean, personally, if it were Dave's bracket and what I think they should do and how they're playing, I would put TCU in that because I think in the last month and a half to 2 months, TCU has really acquitted themselves well with who they've
Yeah,
beaten, how they played, and everything else. The committee tends to take, and rightfully so, a holistic approach, in which case you also have to factor in TCU's early struggles. Um,
their numbers,
but
their numbers kind of scream almost 9. You
right.
know.
And again, so it's kind of hard when the numbers scream that to put them all the way up to a 7.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think they're more likely in that 8-9 scenario, but that will be one of the 8-9 teams that while this year's ones are really strong, like if the difference between getting like a TCU into maybe like a Villanova or something in your 8-9 game could be a big difference, and that's no
Oh,
knock on
yeah,
Villanova. They just haven't had the same opportunities anyway
yeah.
within the league to prove that they're going to beat high quality
I
competition.
I
They
think at one
haven't done it
I think at one
really
time I had them
consistently. So
the last 6 for like one bracket, and then I lowered them back down, and then, man, you start looking, they just haven't beat anybody. I think they have
and
one
again,
top
now
50
you
win, don't
watch
they?
Villanova will go out and they'll be a Sweet 16 or an Elite 8 team, but like based on resume, which is what we have to go on,
Yeah, they just
it's
yeah.
it's it's a little on the light
I'm
side. And
sorry,
then
to back up a second, where do you have St. Mary's currently?
I had him right at the top of my 8 this morning
Okay, okay.
because I had moved UCLA ahead of him, but I need to go back and look at like
So you have
Clemson, St. Mary's.
Miami and Clemson in that 7.
Yes. I
Okay,
kind of I kind of ended up again the whole Louisville thing. It's kind of like the Louisville Miami just seemed like the same team.
yeah.
You know, they both beat each other. Louisville just won down there without Michael Brown, and then they just lost a close game to him without Michael Brown. I suppose, Louisville had the better non-conference. Miami has a couple better conference wins. I don't know. They just seem very Louisville, Miami kind of seem tied at the hip to me, but
Right. All right, let's go down to the bubble now because we talked already the 10. So, and some of these could be 11 or 10s, but we're just going to go. So basically, what I'm between us two, and I've seen around, it's basically down to this. It's down to SMU in Texas, Missouri, VCU, SMU, Miami of Ohio. That be correct?
yeah, in some order. I mean,
Yeah, that's not in
I
any
have
order.
NC State fairly close to that
And
group, but
it stays close. I think they
I
just
think
edge out.
their metrics
Yeah.
are going to be like I just have them just ahead of Missouri. So it's kind of like right there with Santa Clara. They're kind of like,
Santa Clara is the other one I want to throw in there. But I
so
think
to
they've
me,
they've kind of separated themselves with that second St. Mary's win.
yeah, I mean, I think in metrics would suggest that Santa Clara is, to me, it kind of comes, what do you do with the order of like, so some of this is going to be dependent too. If St. Louis, drops the game to Dayton today or loses, then I think they'd certainly fall into a more of a 10 seed than, you know,
Yeah.
right there. But, Texas A&M, UCF, Santa Clara, NC State, it's kind of like, again, what's the flavor of the month do you want and how you want to order those
Right.
teams? I kind of ended up just sort of the consistency over the season and the metrics A&M at the top of that group, and then Central Florida because of their wins, and then Santa Clara, but I moved that around so I could still end up with Santa Clara ahead of UCF just based on their overall metric numbers. Um, Either way, those are good bets to be 10 seeds or one of them into the 9 line.
Yeah. I
Um,
forgot one team, San Diego State, because I added San
yep,
Diego State this morning because they had a positive WOB number. Texas, by the way, they on their paper resume when you look at their you would say they're in, but they're 17 and 14, and they are way underwater in the WOB, and I don't think that's gonna fly
yeah, and again,
because you
some of
use the
this
WOB more for adding teams to the field than actually seeding them. So if that's what you're doing,
yeah, and again, this comes down to, San Diego State makes our lives a lot easier if they win the automatic bid tonight,
right?
um, because then you're gonna have 2 from the Mountain West, and then you're kinda go back to the whole SMU, I mean, then you're kinda down to the whole Miami of Ohio, VCU, SMU debate,
Yeah,
Texas debate of what's the order gonna be, and, I mean, I think as we sit here, there are no guarantees in this. I think with the unbeaten regular season and the fact that at least as of this morning, Miami of Ohio's wins above bubble was under the 40 mark for the rank, and last year, everybody that was, 40 or under received a bid, and their strength of record, I think, was still in the 20s this morning.
yeah,
I I feel like they're gonna get rewarded for their unbeaten regular season, and those metrics on the resume side will likely carry the day. I do think, however, there is a very good chance that Miami of Ohio ends up in Dayton from a seeding perspective, um, and opens there, which would be quite a scene considering how close Miami of Ohio would be to Dayton.
yeah. Where do you have them currently? Do you have them in the playing game?
Yes, I do.
I do too.
I have
And
them
I've seen most people do not, and that's kinda
I have
surprised
them
me
at
a
the
little.
top of the top of my list. So of like the last 4 teams in, I've had it ordered as Miami of Ohio, VCU, SMU, and then Texas. But again, that whole San Diego State winning last night, I need to take a final look at that before the bracket today. Either way, we'll get hopefully a little clarity on that tonight when San Diego State either, um, wins, and then what does their net or what does their wob and stuff look like in the morning.
Recently, and I think they're gonna be in because I think that's, as everybody has said, it's the right thing to do, okay? Um, Recently, though, anybody over 60's been really sweating it out in the net, and they're at 64 now.
Yeah,
Um, their WOB has dropped significantly. They were around the 30 mark. They're 38 now, which
yeah.
is still above water. Um, if they go, yeah, if they, I think because of that in the SOR, they're going to get in. But if they go any kind of predictive metrics to seed, they're going to be in the playing game. There's just no way
Yeah,
around it.
they might end up in the seed list as the last at large in the field.
Yes, yes. And I know some people said, "Well, that's not fair to the other teams. You're putting them so close to home in the playing game." And I'm like, well, it is what it is.
I mean, theoretically, Tim, if we had 4 teams from the same conference in the play-in,
It all
they would
plays.
all play each other again. That's just they're not gonna like, "Okay, well, we can't do that, so let's artificially move 3 of these teams out of here so we don't have
What
to
I think
mess
is
with it."
cool, you could have, if you wanna call the Mountain West the mid-major, you could have 3 teams from mid-majors in the playing game. Miami, Ohio, VCU, and San Diego State. That'd be awesome.
Yeah,
That'd be awesome.
yeah. So,
And I think the
again,
last
I
time
mean, it's
BCU was in there, they went to the Final Four, I believe, wasn't it? I think they did
yeah, I mean,
from
we've
the playing
had
game.
we've had a team from that group make runs before.
So, yeah, so that's kind of the situation. SMU's probably the most after Texas, SMU's the most of danger, probably.
I would say them, and then I would say VCU. I mean, I think VCU's ahead of
Right.
SMU right now. The unknown question is now that they still have a spot open in the field, right? Is they already made a decision on VCU, or is like because with only one spot left,
Yeah.
they will have had to either made a decision on VCU or Miami of Ohio for sure,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
right?
Absolutely. And
And
I'm guessing
SMU.
it's
I mean,
Miami of Ohio.
of those three, they've made a decision on all but so who are they waiting to see on what they're going to vote? Are they
I would
waiting
say
on the
they put Miami of Ohio in. Okay.
Yep.
Um,
Then you're down to deciding is VCU going to get a bid or not, depending on what are they waiting to see what they do today?
yeah. So who would be the odd man out there? Texas, VCU, San Diego State. Those three. Of those three, I think maybe they have not put Texas in. I don't think so.
Yeah,
I'd
well,
be
that's what I'm
surprised if they
wondering.
were more than the last team in.
Right. So
So
that's what
then
we're
you got
wondering.
SMU, VCU, and San Diego State, and one of those they have put in already.
Yeah. So they're holding one at large spot,
Right. I
and
wonder who the one they've put in already. Is it VCU? If it's VCU, then they're in great shape.
yeah.
If it obviously is not San Diego State because they wouldn't have discussed them. So
But like we
so
said,
San Diego State's on the waiting list.
yeah. I mean, to me, they're on the waiting list. Texas is on the waiting list, and
So
then
then
either
you come down to you got one
VCU
spot.
or SMU, depending on how you want to look at it. Probably
So
one of
it
those
would have to
two.
be VCU or SMU would have to be the one that's in.
Yes.
I'm guessing VCU. That's just my guess.
But either way, because like I said, there's part of me that's thinking, let's see if VCU wins their semifinal today. And if they do, and they're going to play in the final tomorrow, then we feel good. We're going to take a final vote to see what the committee thinks. Assuming Miami of Ohio is already in, if they voted SMU in, and again, this is all, we're just speculating here. We're
Right.
spitballing, Tim. I could see them potentially being, we're going to reevaluate VCU, Texas, San Diego State, and you name a fourth team,
Yeah.
Oklahoma,
I guess it
right?
could be I guess it could be on the outside because coming into yesterday, I think New Mexico was right on the cut line. They maybe could have added New Mexico into that list already, and they're waiting on I don't know. Yeah, who knows?
Yeah, like I said, but there is a group of teams that they're waiting to kind of
Yeah,
see how because obviously if San Diego State gets in and you assume Utah State is in, which I think we all do, then basically you don't have to fill that spot.
right.
Your field is set. but maybe, and that's probably why they're leaving it open, because they don't wanna make a determination on who that's gonna be if they're gonna have a spot open, because maybe they would say, even if San Diego State loses, we wanna consider them.
Yeah. Now, here's the deal. It could be that San Diego State, or I'm sorry, the VCU is out, but they may end up the first team out, and then they go and scrub them again, and they win today. They get to, and they're
Exactly.
like,
So that's what I'm
okay,
saying. It's
they
some
could
combination of
leapfrog that
those.
last team, you know?
Yeah, some of those last 3, they're leaving a spot open on purpose because they don't wanna make a decision right now.
I yeah, it has to be VCU San Diego State. That has to be the decision maker there somewhere, you know?
Yeah. Well, put it this way, based on our knowledge of how the system works and kind of the landscape across bracketology, that seems to be the overwhelming consensus, that those are the, I think most people have just come to the realization that chances are Miami of Ohio is going to be in. Um, and so we're working under that premise.
Yeah, I think they're in. They're in, yeah, they're in. They can't, we by a process of elimination, we can't have all those teams out and then be waiting for
Yeah.
one spot. Some of them have to be in, so I think you're right there. Okay, I think we covered it. Any last thoughts?
No, I mean, it's going to be final. We're excited about, again, we'll probably have a Sunday bracket sometime, at lunch, and then we'll have an adjustments that we have to make
Yeah, I think
essentially
it's
because,
come together pretty good this year,
yeah.
though. Don't you?
Yeah, like I said, we're just waiting, and to see how this last couple things play out.
I mean, typically, if you go to bracket matrix and look over the years, the best, the guys who finish in the top 10, top 20 in a particular year, they lose points in that middle section somewhere, somehow. That's just the way it is. And then
Yeah.
usually something down the road. We
You
haven't
get you
really,
you have a 14 and the committee has them a 15 a
yeah,
couple of times
we
or
haven't
something, or
talked
a
about
13.
AQs, but this year's been, I think, a bigger struggle than most because you've had so many upsets. So I've seen a lot of people have Queens in the 16. To me, Queens is, you look at their resume and their metrics, they're way above some of those other teams. Where do you put a UMBC if they win? You know, they've only beaten one team, I think, outside of 300 all year.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and then too, we're gonna see, like, with the in the Conference USA, just that whole thing fell apart. So now you've
Yeah.
got, like,
Well,
Louisiana Tech, who's probably, based on their resume, a high 16 today,
yes,
maybe,
yes. That's where
right?
I have them.
So, but if Kennesaw wins, it could stay right there. So that might be an easy switch.
Yeah.
And then it kind of comes down to, how do you order Long Island and UMBC and Siena?
That Long Island's the hard one for me because I think when you look at their numbers, they probably should be a 15. But then if you go, like the committee has some years just almost right down the net, they're kind of like a 16. So I think though with these added, like Louisiana Tech helped push some teams out of there, out of the
Yeah, because,
16.
well, with Liberty losing and the lesser teams in that league playing for the
Sam
title,
Houston,
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
with the top 2 teams gone, it kind of buoyed everybody up. Like, it's very likely now, it's very likely that, like, Dakota State's gonna end up as a 13 now.
Tennessee State's at one time was in my playing game for almost all year. All of a sudden, because everybody else is losing, they've moved up to like a 14 now.
Yeah. They're like the bottom of the 14 now, just
Yeah,
because, by default. And
yeah.
that happens every year. I mean, it's, you know, because, like, Lehigh winning, knocking Navy out, that basically boosted everybody up a line.
Yeah. So that's gonna help if you're looking at your bracket, that's gonna help the 3 seeds. If you've got a if you're down to a team that really should be a 15 and now they're a 14, maybe even a 16, that just floats everybody up like yeah.
Lesser chances of upsets on the 14 and 15 games
Yeah.
when that happens.
Yes. Absolutely. So, I do
But I do
think
think
though,
we'll have some good 4-13s this year, because,
I think we have a
Northern Iowa fully healthy
absolutely.
is they're not gonna be a favorite, but that's not gonna be a cupcake, and they could still end up at the back of the 12 line. I mean, it depends. If Yale loses, to Harvard or something, then I think Northern Iowa, vaults up and becomes a 12.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, Hofstra is, you know, more than capable of giving somebody a game. So I think, and then the 12s, I mean, if South Florida wins,
Oh, I
they
think our 12s
potentially
are
could have
some
been
of the
in that march
strongest we've
team.
had. I
And,
really do.
McNeese,
I've actually
nobody
moved South Florida up to the 11 line.
yeah, and McNeese is, a quality team.
Yeah. I
Akron's a
wouldn't wanna
quality
play any of
team.
those teams. Like, that's a strong list of teams right there.
So those 5 seeds are gonna have to,
Yeah.
come ready to play next Thursday and
Yeah.
Friday.
Yeah. And you could see, I could see a Wisconsin, say they get a 5. Though, those they don't play, even though they're able to beat some really athletic teams, they don't play that they play more of a mid-major style than a major you know what I mean? Like, now they have the 2 best guard tandem in the country, so that kills usually mid-major teams
Yeah,
but that's generally what those teams have are good guards. So,
yeah,
it just depends on if they're looking ahead to that 4 or 5 matchup already. It's matchups are huge in that section of the bracket, and that when the bracket comes out, we'll be able to talk about that.
yep.
So anyway, we're gonna get off of here, and we're gonna get our brackets out, and you'll be able to take a look at that in the next hour or so, and then we're gonna pump out the BB rankings as well, so you can take a look at where these teams fit, especially at that crucial 44, 45, 46, 47 cut line. All right, Dave, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Tim.
Everybody enjoy the day of basketball.